That's where.
If I may, in March of 2004, when the fire services and public got involved in marijuana grow operations in our city as a public safety issue, it was in conjunction with a fire that happened at 3 o'clock in the morning from a grow operation that was actually entering two homes that were occupied on both sides of it. And it was only to the great fortune of somebody that was driving home from work, a late shift worker, that it stopped and alerted the neighbors, and they bailed out of the house while they were sleeping and their houses were being impinged. Home in the middle was a grow-op, unintended. In other words, the grower wasn't there at the time. And then going to a town hall meeting and listening to the residents say, well, you know, that guy has been busted by police and arrested and charged 5 times. What are you doing about it? Now look what's happened in our neighborhood. What are you doing? Well, all we have left is to do what we've always done. Arrest him, charge him. In this case, we didn't because he wasn't around and we couldn't link him to the fire. So that's what we're faced with. And these citizens are sitting in our community halls saying, what the hell are you doing? Why isn't somebody doing something about it? How can this continue? What are you doing? Police are doing their job. They're arresting, charging. But you know what? They're out the next week. They might get a fine. As a matter of fact, as time goes on, we've seen penalties even lessen. So in this case, and I'm not talking about personally about passing a joint. I'm talking about heavy drug production and what's going on in our communities. And then when is the grow rip going to occur? When's the drive-by shooting going to occur? All the things that are coming into our neighborhoods, and our citizens are sitting there and they're asking us as public safety officials, our mayor, our council, our police chief, fire chief, sitting there listening to this, and we can't help them. And so I started on and I've made 50 or 60 presentations right across Canada and the United States on alternate initiatives to marijuana grow operations. And I open up by saying, the reason we're doing this is because changing the criminal justice system is like trying to stop the earth from turning. And that's what I've told people, because for 10 years we've been complaining about it and nothing happens. But you know, I've got faith now. I had the privilege of being invited to speak to the Justice Committee on Organized Crime on their study, and got some positive comments back from the elected officials on, you know, you've actually got some solutions you're suggesting here, and they were, I was pleased to hear that. And here we sit before you today and testify on what's going on in our communities. And I have a lot of hope that you'll do the right thing. And thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. That's the Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Angus. I had a rather more mundane question related to the actual wording of the bill. And it's really aimed at the serving police here, who are indeed on the front line. Although if either of you gentlemen has a comment, that would be good too. In one of our meetings last week, there was a discussion about the fact that this bill kicks in at 6 marijuana plants. And there was some discussion to the effect that that might be a bit low. Mr. Plekas, to whom you referred, I think, allowed us how, in his view, 30 plants, I think it was, would be a more realistic minimum at which to have the full weight of the law kick in. And I was just wondering how, from your point of view, where you think the appropriate minimum would be. Does 6 plants seem low to you, or just right, or high as a minimum?
Well, from my perspective, and I'm sure Mr. Massicotte's going to add to this from his experience, but, you know, you could produce up to 1 pound of marijuana with 1 plant, depending, again, if it's coming from a grow operation or whether it's grown naturally outdoors. The fact of the matter is, when you start producing, you know, 1 pound of marijuana, that is a lot of marijuana. And again, we're not talking about, you know, Joe, who's going to university, walking around with 1 pound of marijuana, you know, on his, you know, in his school bag. that's, certainly from our perspective, that is a large amount of drugs. We're not talking about, buying or circulating a joint or 2 or 5. It's a significant amount. I don't know if...
Mr. Massicotte, would you agree?
I would say that 6 plants is a good saw-off because, for a number of reasons, and marijuana plants, if I could draw a parallel between marijuana plants and apple trees. So in the old days before, you'd have an apple tree and it would be a big tree and you'd get a lot of fruit off that big tree. And nowadays, there are apple trees that are lower to the ground that don't require ladders to pick the apples or whatever, and they're smaller trees. They produce a little less fruit, but nonetheless, they're apple trees. So one apple tree might produce, a big apple tree, 10 bushels, and a smaller apple tree, 4 bushels. So when you say plant, it's difficult to say. Depends on what size the plant is. For personal use, if that's what we're talking about, people having personal use, 6 plants would be more than enough for a person to have personal use. And that, as far as enforcement goes, we're not going after the people with 6 plants. That's not what we target. We don't have the resources to do that. We try to target, because it's the same investigation, we target the big growers who are involved in organized crime.
Okay, and I think this really will be the last word. Senator Nona had a supplementary.
Just one simple number. Mr. Garis, in your experience, what is the size of an average grow up in your community?
Our average grow is 200 plants.
200. That's probably the answer that we're trying to get.
And Mr. Fassbender?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, I think the 6 is a reasonable number because of the size of the plants and some of the things that I've seen in our communities where grow-ups have been busted. I also think that one other comment that I'd like to make, just to wrap this up, is that, the issue about what if this young person was charged. I think if we wait to create legislation that is totally bulletproof, that the what-ifs will never happen, we'll never pass any legislation. And I think we have to, again, set some limits. It's like saying, well, how much sale of marijuana is too much? How much money someone's making is too much or too little? I just don't think we should go there. And I want to thank you again for this opportunity.
We want to thank you all. It has been extremely interesting, very helpful to us, truly very helpful as we consider this bill, as we continue our incredibly extraordinary study of this bill.